Hello, everybody. Today we have a fun one. If you like to get stoned, you like to lift weights, well, this one is for you. So, we're going to be deep diving into the intricacies of cannabis and bodybuilding. I'm going to go into this assuming you already know what cannabis pot is, and you already have a little bit of a bodybuilding background, so I'm really going to be going over what they have to do with each other. What is cannabis's role and effect in bodybuilding as far as recovery, strength, stamina, overall endurance, appetite, mental? So let's go ahead and look into all these. So cannabis is mainly going to have its mechanisms of action at the neurotransmitter sites and your body's own endocannabinoid system. We're primarily going to be looking at the body's own endocannabinoid system, specifically the CB1 and CB2 receptors. These are heavily affected by both THC and CBD, although they play a slightly different role to varying degrees. There's also certain things that affect CB1 and CB2 receptors go as far as anabolics, steroids, and supplements go. So we're also going to see how those can possibly play together for a positive or a negative effect. So CB1 agonists have the potential as a treatment for pain and inflammation, things like multiple sclerosis, neurodegenerative disorders, while CB1 antagonists have been used to treat obesity-related metabolic disorders. Cannabis is going to be an agonist of the CB1 and CB2 receptors. THC is primarily going to go through the CB1 receptor, while cannabinoids are primarily going to go into this CB2 receptor. Things like CBD, of course. CB2 agonists are used for treating inflammatory pains, neurodegenerative disorders, and things of that sort. So looking baseline at THC itself, what does THC do? THC is primarily the molecule in cannabis that is going to get you high. It is also going to drastically increase appetite, which could be a good or bad thing depending on where you're at in your bodybuilding journey of the year. Cannabis can be a great inclusion in the off season if you have some trouble eating. Maybe not so much if you're on prep. However, it could on prep be used for sleep. So we're going to get into a few of the different things here that it's going to be helpful for. CBD, that I'm sure you've heard plenty about, is going to be almost all positives for bodybuilding. It's going to reduce inflammation, pain. It's going to help with a variety of other things like antipsychotic effects. It could help relieve nausea. CBG, which is going to help affect neurological disorders, helps with skin disorders and could have some antifungal effects. You're going to have CBC, which can block inflammation. You're going to have CBN, which is a really good one for sleep, promotes a lot of sleep relaxation, can also induce appetite, also helps with pain as well. So when we look at the CB1 and the CB2 receptor, the CB1 receptor has often been called the reward pathway of the brain. And a lot of times when you stimulate this with something like cannabis or primarily things that have an effect on dopamine, the CB1 receptor is going to be hit more and more, and it's going to create almost a blunting-like effect as far as the way the reward center works. You know, little things like getting up, making your bed in the morning aren't really going to mean anything to you as far as that goes. Where when maybe the CB1 receptor isn't getting hit so often and there's not so much dopamine circulating, little things like that do actually kind of give you a little boost and feel like you're doing a little something that give you a little dopamine rush. One of the anabolic steroids that tend to affect this the most and have the biggest impact on the CB1 receptor is nandrolone. So if you're going to be using nandrolone with cannabis, I would really be paying attention to how it's making you feel as far as the reward pathway goes. A lot of times you might find yourself accomplishing things, but it just seems like it's not enough. You know, you might work an 8-hour day, put in a really good workout, get all your meals in and nail everything, and it feels like you're just still failing. So that's something you kind of have to be careful with. And speaking on nandrolone and cannabis, they both affect, to a certain degree, the epithelial lining of cells. So you need to be careful with that because that can cause damage to general cells, heart cells. Not something you want to mess around with because that can lead to cardiovascular incidents in the future. So one thing people have been talking about for years is cannabis's effect on hormones, specifically testosterone, estrogen, and prolactin. I'm sure you've heard over the years people will say cannabis can give you gyno, cannabis can lower your testosterone. So when we look into it in all the studies, this is what we find definitively. Cannabis actually reduces serum E2 estradiol. Cannabis does increase serum prolactin, actually affected by the prolactin rise from testosterone, that you are going to get prolactin side effects such as gynecomastia. So is there really a possibility there? There could be if you are extremely sensitive to it. Cannabis use actually increases favorable testosterone to estrogen ratio, which is primarily due to the lowered estrogen. When you look into cannabis, not a lot of people talk about terpenes. It's starting to get talked about more, especially in states where cannabis is legal. But there are a wide variety of terpenes that can have specific effects on the body, from inducing relaxation, stimulating appetite, suppressing appetite even, and so on. So if you are able to look at the terpene profile in a cannabis strain that you're using, it might be favorable to apply some of these to your bodybuilding goals. In the end, there's some terpenes that might make you super hungry, so you could look at strains that have a little bit more of that, combined maybe with more THC, more CBG, more CBN, to really actually boost your appetite in a major way, or vice versa. Some terpenes like terpinolene and something like THCV, a higher content of those, might actually suppress your appetite a little bit. So the CB1 receptor's primary function is to mediate most of the psychoactive effects as cannabinoids, where the CB2 is principally involved in anti-inflammatory and immunosuppressive actions. Like we mentioned, CB1 is also the reward pathway and can have overlapping issues with nandrolone, as nandrolone also affects the CB1. When you combine CBD with THC, it can actually negate the effect that it has on the CB1 pathway, which is a good thing in the long run, because the CB1 pathway is going to be where most of the harm is going to be done. So if you can get more CBD in with your THC, that is an all-around good thing. These are overall cons for THC and bodybuilding. THC overall is not good for the cardiovascular system. It does have effects of messing with heart cells. It can reduce respirations. There's a variety of things that it can do. However, it has not been separated enough to determine whether this is from the smoke itself or from the actual THC. So, err on the side of caution. There is, of course, the psychological stress that comes with cannabis. Some people cannot necessarily handle it. So this is not something you'd want to use before the gym. You might find yourself having difficulty with balance. You might lose a little bit of strength, and you might find yourself just overall not having a good time. THC, when used, does cause an acute spike in blood pressure and heart rate. This is something you want to look out for, especially if you're using other anabolic steroids that have these effects as well. You might notice that, say you are on prep or in a situation where you're running a lot of high stimulants, or you're in a situation where your blood pressure is high. If you use cannabis, you're going to find that maybe getting up and down makes you a little dizzy. It affects those, it makes the effects of those a little more prominent. So some benefits of THC in bodybuilding. On the short term, sleep will be improved. Your non-REM and REM sleep cycles will be more natural. Again, this is the short term. When you use cannabis long term in higher doses, this actually reverses and the sleep becomes less effective. CBD does calm the nervous system, which can be something that is good if you do very intense workouts, if you are a powerlifter, if you are someone that does high intensity interval training. These are all things that you might want to look at using to help just calm the nervous system and get yourself into a more relaxed state, something similar to if you use a sauna or a hot tub or meditation, or just something to relax your nervous system, slow the heart rate a little bit. This is going to be more on the CBD side, although overall THC will have that effect as well. It will be anti-inflammatory, which is going to be good for joints, joint healing properties. It's not going to be anti-inflammatory in the effect that it's going to stop the inflammatory process of muscle building. There are a lot of indirect mechanisms that cannabis has that may aid in recovery. That's going to be sleep, that's going to be relaxation, that could be potentiating appetite, causing you to eat a little bit more food. The sleep factor is something, especially on the short term, that will be really beneficial for recovery. Cannabis, and not everybody, but in some people, those who tolerate it well, can actually lower cortisol levels. But in people that do not tolerate it well, it will increase cortisol levels. So again, this is an individual thing, and you're going to have to find what works best for you. So my overall view is I would say cannabis is helpful for bodybuilding when used appropriately. I think it should be treated just like any other supplement or drug in your regimen, if you can, through the form of edibles or concentrates, or just doing the math on the flower. Proper dosing and dose timing is going to be important. And it's really going to depend whether you're in a bulk and a cut, whether you're in contest prep. So if I was in an off season, I would utilize cannabis for appetite increasing, and when cannabis has been shown to have a positive effect on insulin sensitivity as well. So that could be beneficial in the off season. If I was using cannabis on a cut, it would probably be few and far in between, and it would probably be primarily used when I have difficulty sleeping. Same would be said on a prep. However, I would probably use it a little bit more often, just because you're going to be much more exhausted, and especially in the end when you're exhausted but you're on a very high amount of stimulants or something like tren, and you may have difficulty sleeping. That's something where cannabis can be added in your sleep arsenal. So overall, I think it really comes down to your choice on whether or not you want to use cannabis and bodybuilding together. I have constantly for years. The whole entire time I've been bodybuilding, except for maybe a year or two, I have been using cannabis. I have not really noticed any negative effects. I lift when I'm stoned pretty consistently. I find that it helps the mind-muscle connection. However, I do have a lot of experience with that, so that's something I don't recommend that you do unless, you know, you've been smoking for a long time or using cannabis for a long time. It's something that you're used to. But it may be something you might want to start utilizing for recovery if it's something you haven't yet. I would start with more heavy CBD strains if you're going to be going that route, and then just kind of find what works best for you. If you guys have any questions, please comment below. I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video, and I hope you enjoy.